I used to think I was one of the lucky ones. You know the type: stable job, roof over my head, wife who laughed at my bad jokes and kissed me on the cheek before I left for work every morning. To the outside world, our marriage looked like something out of a Hallmark card, 15 years deep, no scandals, no screaming matches in the driveway, just a quiet, middle-aged couple growing older in sync. But now, when I look back at those years, all I see are shadows cast by a truth I was too blind, or maybe too trusting, to see. Because here's the thing nobody warns you about: when someone marries you for security, for predictability, for the soft place to land rather than the person they actually want, they don't wear it on their sleeve. They wear it in subtle glances, in delayed kisses, in the way they sigh when your hand brushes theirs under the dinner table. The signs were always there, I just refused to read them. It started small, like a slow leak in the hull of a ship you don't notice until your feet are underwater. At first, it was the way she stared past me during our late-night movies, her wine untouched, eyes cloudy with thoughts that had nothing to do with the screen or me. Then came the phone, always face down, always guarded like it held nuclear codes instead of coffee memes from coworkers. But I brushed it off. We'd grown comfortable, I told myself. People change with time, evolve, pull inward. Marriage is a slow dance, not a fireworks show. And still, somewhere deep in the marrow of my bones, I started to feel it, that quiet ache that whispers you're not enough anymore. But I wasn't ready to admit that, not out loud. Not even to myself. I wish I could say there was a single moment that pulled the blindfold off, a flash of lightning that lit up the truth in one blinding strike, but it didn't happen that way. What happened was far worse. It was death by 1,000 moments, the missed anniversaries, the disinterest in my successes, the way she flinched when I reached for her hand in public like I was a burden she had to carry rather than a man she once claimed to love. Looking back, the man I was then, he still had hope. He still believed that with a little patience, a little effort, things could turn around. That maybe love just needed time to catch its breath. I didn't know yet that the air had already gone out of her lungs, and I was just too deaf to hear her silent screaming. It happened on a Tuesday, quiet, unremarkable, deceptively ordinary, the kind of day where you wake up expecting nothing but the usual routine: hot coffee, a kiss on the cheek, maybe a text exchange about what to grab for dinner. Instead, I got a conversation that cracked my world like a hairline fracture across glass, invisible at first, but destined to shatter everything. We were sitting on the back porch, just the two of us under a sky that still held the warmth of early summer, and I remember I had just said something dumb, something about the way the neighbor's new dog wouldn't shut up. She laughed. Or at least, she did that thing where she curled her lips upward without letting it reach her eyes. And then, without warning, she tilted her head, took a long sip of her wine, and said, "Do you ever think, maybe we just settled?" At first, I didn't understand the question. I thought maybe she meant the house, or the town, or the way life had dulled around the edges since we hit our 40s. I gave her this awkward half-laugh, trying to meet her in the middle of what I assumed was a shared midlife crisis moment. But then she looked at me, really looked at me, and it wasn't a question anymore. It was a statement dressed in disguise. There was something in her eyes that made my stomach twist, something sharp and unapologetic, like she had rehearsed this line in her head 100 times before it finally slipped through her lips. "Don't get me wrong," she added, her voice low and calculated like she was breaking bad news to a stranger, "you've always been safe, solid, good. But sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if I'd waited a little longer. If I'd chosen someone who made me feel alive, not just secure." I didn't respond. Not right away. I remember blinking a few times like maybe I hadn't heard her right, like maybe the wine had warped her words or I was dreaming some twisted nightmare where my wife, the woman I had built my life around, had just reduced 15 years of shared memories, holidays, arguments, and quiet Sunday mornings into a single backhanded compliment. Safe. That was what I was to her. A placeholder. A cardboard cutout of a man she could lean on while waiting for someone more exciting to sweep her off her feet. And right there, in that moment, as the cicadas hummed in the trees and her wine glass caught the light like a crystal dagger, I knew something had changed. Not in her. In me. It was 3 nights after the porch conversation, the one that left a fracture in my chest I couldn't quite ignore, when the real confession came, and let me tell you, nothing in life ever truly prepares you for the moment you hear your spouse speak about your entire marriage like it was a strategic decision instead of a love story. We were in the kitchen, the kind of quiet moment where you'd expect light conversation about bills or weekend plans, and she was pouring herself another glass of wine, her third that evening. I remember the way the light from the overhead pendant caught her hair just right, how she looked almost serene, peaceful in a way that made me feel uneasy, like the calm before a controlled demolition. And then, with a sigh so deep it felt rehearsed, she looked over her shoulder and said something that I still hear in my sleep like a ghost whispering through cracked walls, "You know, I think I only married you because I needed stability. I never felt fireworks. Not once. You were just a safe harbor. A phase before I really figured out who I was." At first, I couldn't even move. My hand was still clutching the refrigerator door like I was frozen mid-thought, like my brain refused to compute the meaning of her words. She wasn't crying. There was no remorse, no hesitation, just this icy clarity in her voice, like she'd finally crossed something off a list she'd been avoiding for years. "Don't take it personally," she said, her voice so maddeningly calm it made my hands tremble. "You were exactly what I needed back then. Someone reliable. Someone who made me feel safe while I figured my life out. But now, I want passion. I want to feel alive again." And just like that, my entire world, 15 years of inside jokes, of late-night talks, of quiet vacations and framed family photos, was reduced to a utility. I wasn't her husband. I was her life raft. A temporary fix. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything or storm out the door. No, I just stood there in that cheap yellow kitchen light, feeling the walls of our home close in around me like a coffin. I think there's a particular kind of horror that comes not from blood or violence, but from the quiet unraveling of something you thought was sacred. The way your reality begins to split at the seams, like a slow-motion collapse of everything you believe to be true. And even then, a part of me still wanted to believe there had to be more to it. That maybe she was drunk. That maybe she didn't mean it. But deep down, I knew better. That night, as she went upstairs humming some song I couldn't place, I sat at the kitchen table for over 2 hours, staring at the condensation on my untouched drink, and silently realized that the woman I loved never truly existed, not for me. They say grief doesn't come in one big wave. It arrives in fragments, unexpected and sharp, like glass buried in carpet. That's how the days felt after her confession, like I was walking barefoot through the wreckage of my own life, pretending nothing had shattered while bleeding from the inside out. I still made the coffee every morning, still folded the laundry she left in the dryer, still kissed her cheek when she passed me in the hallway out of pure muscle memory. But the truth is, I wasn't kissing my wife. I was kissing the ghost of a woman I'd invented, someone who had never truly existed except in the version of the story I told myself at night to fall asleep. Every detail of our life together had taken on this strange, almost surreal tone, like I was watching a play I used to star in, now replaced by a version of myself who merely moved through the motions. The worst part wasn't the anger, it was the silence. She didn't bring it up again. Not once. No apology, no elaboration, not even the slightest acknowledgement that she had dropped a nuclear bomb in the middle of our kitchen and then walked away like it was a spilled cup of coffee. She just kept living, like she'd checked something off her to-do list, confess emotional detachment, done. There were moments when I'd watch her from across the room and feel this eerie detachment, like I was observing a stranger who had stolen my wife's body, who smiled and laughed and flipped her hair exactly the same way, but inside was someone else entirely. At night, she'd sleep peacefully while I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above us, wondering how many of our shared memories she had mentally edited out, how many dinners or vacations or moments of joy she had endured rather than enjoyed. I started walking more, long drives to nowhere, quiet afternoons spent parked by the lake with the windows down, the radio off, and 1,000 unanswered questions screaming in my head. I wasn't thinking about revenge back then, not yet. I was still stuck in that terrible limbo between denial and clarity, still replaying every word she'd said, trying to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it sounded, that maybe this was just a phase. But deep down, the man inside me, the one I used to be before I let love soften me, he was stirring, and what he felt wasn't sadness. It was something colder, something sharper, something that had been asleep for a long time and was now slowly waking up, hungry for truth, and, eventually, justice. The moment it changed, the precise second where the sorrow began to harden into something darker, something surgical, came unexpectedly, like most real awakenings do. I was shaving, of all things. Just standing there in front of the mirror, dragging a blade across my jaw like I'd done 1,000 times before, when I caught my own eyes staring back at me with a look I hadn't seen since my 20s. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was calculation, measured, patient, and quiet. That's when it hit me. She had stripped me of everything except the one thing that had always made me dangerous when I needed to be, control. And I realized that if she was playing the game of reinvention, of discarding the past like a husk, then I could play it too. But unlike her, I wouldn't stumble around looking for something to make me feel alive. No, I would build something. I would build my way out. I didn't say a word to her. Not a single passive-aggressive comment, not a fight, not a late-night confrontation. I kept the mask on, the dependable husband, the mild-mannered provider, the silent witness to his own erasure, and meanwhile, behind that mask, I began constructing my quiet little war. First came the digital trail. I started checking the credit card statements more closely, noticed she'd recently subscribed to a new fitness app and started paying for Ubers from locations that didn't match her work hours. Then came the cloud sync. Her phone, synced to our shared laptop for years, offered me a backdoor into her entire world. She hadn't changed the password. That was her mistake. Within 2 days, I had access to every photo, every message, every coy little conversation with names I didn't recognize. I read it all. I didn't even feel pain anymore, just a cold, methodical sense of inventory. This is what betrayal looks like when it's neatly organized into time-stamped texts and selfies taken in hotel elevators. And still, I said nothing. She'd hum her way through the kitchen while texting her little passion project, completely unaware that the man across from her was no longer her safe harbor. I had become something else, something sharper. Every quiet breakfast, every lazy evening on the couch, every kiss on the cheek before bed, it was all part of the theater now. But unlike her, I wasn't playing pretend. I was collecting data. Planning exits. Drawing blueprints in my head. And what started as pain, then turned to clarity, was now something even more dangerous: purpose. She'd lit the match that burned our marriage down. Now I was gathering the ashes. And I was going to make sure she choked on them. I found the first photo at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, buried deep in the cloud backup she never knew I still had access to, a photo so carelessly taken that it almost insulted me more than the content itself. There she was, the woman I had given 15 years of my life to, sitting in the passenger seat of a car I didn't recognize, head tilted, eyes glazed with that coy, slightly smug expression she used to save for special occasions. And next to her, gripping the steering wheel with the kind of arrogance only a man who thinks he's won a prize can wear, was him, maybe 10 years younger than me, smug to the point of parody, his other hand casually resting on her thigh like he owned it. I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. I just zoomed in slowly, letting the details sink into my skull like slow poison. The timestamp told me this had happened 3 weeks ago, the same weekend she claimed she was visiting her sister in Asheville. That's when I stopped doubting. That's when I knew, for sure, that my marriage wasn't just broken. It was desecrated. From there, it was like pulling a single thread on a sweater and watching the entire thing unravel. The more I looked, the more I found. Hotel confirmations forwarded to her email under the guise of work travel. Screen-capped texts saved in her photo album, complete with emojis and pet names that made my skin crawl. One in particular hit me harder than the others, not because it was explicit, but because of how casually cruel it was. He had written, "Does he even notice? You could be out all night and he'd still be waiting at the door with his slippers and loyalty." She responded with a laughing emoji and said, "He's like a golden retriever, loyal, boring, and too easy to lie to." I don't remember exhaling after I read that. I think I just sat there, pulse steady, rage burning low and cold in my chest like a quiet furnace. That was the moment I stopped trying to salvage anything. That was the moment I started building my plan, not just for divorce, but for legacy. I wasn't going to be her golden retriever. I was going to be the ghost that haunted her for the rest of her life. I started documenting everything. I took screenshots, downloaded entire message threads, and even screen recorded her cloud gallery from start to finish. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because unlike her, I knew how to wait. I knew that revenge, the kind that truly lingers, requires patience, precision, and most importantly, silence. She still kissed me goodnight. She still let me cook her dinner. She still laid her head on the pillow beside mine, never knowing that the man she thought was oblivious was now a shadow, watching, recording, preparing. And the entire time she was falling deeper into her little fantasy world, she had no idea that every step she took was leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that led directly into the fire I was about to set beneath her feet. The beauty of planning your escape while living in the lion's den is that no one ever suspects you've already started digging your way out. While she pranced through our house like it was still hers, spinning lies with the same ease she stirred her morning coffee, I was quietly dismantling every legal, financial, and emotional tether that had kept me bound to her. The first step was visiting an attorney, someone recommended by a friend who had been through a brutal divorce and came out the other side not just surviving, but smiling. I sat across from the man in a sleek office with heavy oak bookshelves and eyes that looked like they'd seen 1,000 betrayals before mine. "You've already done most of the work," he said after seeing the evidence. "Most men come to me with suspicions. You came with a damn war chest." That was the first time I smiled in weeks. The second step was money. Quietly, methodically, and without triggering a single alert, I began untangling our finances. I closed the joint credit cards. I froze any automatic transfers she could use. I opened a new account in a different bank under a business LLC I'd created years ago but never used, and I moved just enough to avoid suspicion, but enough to protect what I'd built. I hired a forensic accountant, not just to track her spending but to make sure that every dollar she'd siphoned from our life together would be documented, accounted for, and, when the time came, weaponized. I even made changes to the title of our home, restructuring it under a trust one controlled, which she'd signed off on years ago during a refinance she hadn't even bothered to read. She was so confident in her little fantasy world, so certain I'd remain her background character, that she never even saw the foundation shifting beneath her. But the most important step was the one she'd never anticipate. I began erasing myself from the life she thought she controlled. I pulled my name off unnecessary bills. I backed up every photo, every piece of documentation, every email. I even drafted my own version of our divorce agreement, one that I would later present like a magician pulling a loaded pistol from a velvet-lined case. I wasn't just planning to leave. I was planning to disappear so completely, so cleanly, and with such precision that it would make her question if she'd ever truly known me at all. And the best part? While I was orchestrating this silent vanishing act, she was still sending him selfies from our bedroom, still laughing at me behind my back, still mistaking my silence for weakness. But what she didn't understand was this: you don't hear a storm when it's moving underground. You only hear it when it breaks through the floorboards and swallows the house whole. I chose our anniversary. Poetic, I know, 15 years to the day I promised to love and protect a woman who saw me not as a partner but as a phase, a rung on a ladder she planned to outgrow the second she felt strong enough to leap. That morning, I made her breakfast like I always did, the smell of cinnamon waffles and fresh brewed coffee filling our kitchen like a lie wrapped in warmth. She came downstairs still in her robe, hair a mess, scrolling her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. I watched her laugh at something, probably a text from him, and I smiled too, because I knew she had no idea this would be the last time she ever saw me standing in that kitchen. I handed her a card, soft blue envelope, plain white ribbon, nothing fancy. She didn't even wait to sit down before tearing it open with one hand, still sipping her coffee with the other. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten in the same ink I used to write her love letters back when I still believed they meant something. It said, "Thank you for the clarity." That was it. No, "I love you." No, "Happy anniversary." Just 7 words that, if she'd been paying attention, would have chilled her blood. But she didn't get it, not at first. She chuckled, confused, asked if it was a joke, but I just kissed her on the cheek and told her I'd be home late. Then I left, just like that, like it was any other day, and I let her sit there in that sun-drenched kitchen completely unaware that her entire life was about to collapse in on itself. While she spent the afternoon texting her affair partner and sipping overpriced wine at lunch with her equally oblivious friends, I was at my lawyer's office, signing the final version of the divorce papers that had been in the works for months. By the time she figured out what was happening, it was already done. Her access to our accounts, revoked. Her name on the house, removed. The utilities, transferred. Her phone, still active, but now routed through a clone-eyed mirror to gather proof. The server with the evidence. Already with my lawyer. And the best part? She wouldn't even get to argue. I had the documentation, the admissions, the screenshots, and the digital trail so airtight that no judge in this state would give her a dime more than she deserved, if that. When she finally called me, panicked, voice cracking, full of this desperate confusion like she was the victim, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, "You told me I was just a phase." So I ended mine. And then I hung up, permanently. When the house of cards finally collapsed, it didn't fall with a scream, it fell with silence, the kind that wraps around your throat and drags you into cold, bitter clarity. By the time she walked through the door and saw the envelope on the kitchen counter, the keys to the SUV gone, the Wi-Fi disconnected, and her login credentials invalid on every shared account, I was already 2 states away. I hadn't just left, I had evacuated, scorched earth style. She called 27 times that night, each voicemail more frantic than the last, and when the sobbing began, I could almost hear her realizing what it meant to be alone for the first time in her adult life. I didn't answer, not once. Instead, I sat in a quiet rented house by the coast, with the ocean clawing gently at the shore, and listened to her crumble in real time. I had learned something about her, something she never intended for me to know. Without an audience, she was nothing. Her soulmate, the man-child she'd been sneaking off to see like a teenager breaking curfew, didn't last a week once the fallout began. Turns out, he wasn't ready to play house with a woman whose life was imploding from every angle. The moment she told him she was being served divorce papers and that her lifestyle was about to shrink drastically, he ghosted her faster than a college kid skipping town after spring break. She tried to call his bluff, posting filtered selfies and fake adventures on social media, pretending to be thriving, pretending the world hadn't just yanked the ground from beneath her. But those closest to her, her friends, her family, our neighbors, they all knew. Because I made sure the truth reached them, wrapped in screenshots, time stamps, and call logs. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. I simply told the story she tried to bury, and let them decide who they believed. Spoiler, it wasn't her. I heard through mutuals that she moved back into her parents' place temporarily, which must have felt like crawling back into a childhood she never respected. Her job. Let go, thanks to inappropriate use of company time and resources, documented, of course, in that little digital folder I'd quietly labeled insurance. She thought I was boring, thought I was passive, thought I'd roll over and take it with grace. And maybe that was true, until she mistook kindness for weakness. Until she told me I was just a phase. That word kept echoing in my mind like a church bell during a funeral. And in the end, she was right about one thing. I was a phase. The one that came before her downfall. Peace, as it turns out, doesn't arrive with trumpets or fireworks or some grand cinematic climax. It shows up slow, quiet, almost hesitant, like an old friend who isn't sure if they're welcome. I found it one morning on the porch of a small cottage I now rent on the edge of a sleepy coastal town, wrapped in the sound of waves rolling in like breath after panic. The air smelled like salt and wood smoke, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a shoe to drop or a phone to buzz with some problem I didn't cause. I had no one to prove myself to, no one to tiptoe around. My mornings are my own now. I wake up with the sunrise, drink coffee in a worn flannel shirt, and watch the gulls fight over scraps on the sand. It's the kind of life I used to dream about back when I thought love meant sacrificing yourself in increments. Turns out, loving yourself enough to walk away, that's the real peace. And I earned every second of it. She still tries to reach out, though less often now. The messages have shifted, no longer angry or blaming, but hollow, grasping things like, I didn't know what I had, or, can we talk, just once? There was even a handwritten letter once, smudged in places like she'd cried while writing it, folded awkwardly like she had rushed to send it before changing her mind. I didn't respond. There's nothing left to say to someone who only realized your worth after they destroyed the home you built together. I heard through someone mutual that she's renting a small apartment near the city, works part-time now, barely speaks to her parents. And him, the one who was supposed to be the passion she craved. He moved on within a month, according to her social media, which she keeps public like she's still hoping someone out there is watching. Maybe she hopes I'm still watching. Maybe that's the cruelest part. Because I'm not. Not anymore. Some nights, I walk barefoot across the sand with a bourbon in one hand and the stars overhead so clear it feels like they were stitched there just for me. I think about how far I've come, about the man I used to be, the loyal dog she joked about, the phase she dismissed, the life she thought she could trade up from. I don't carry anger with me anymore. I carry lessons. I carry freedom. And I carry this one truth like armor against anything the future throws my way. They never expect the quiet ones to be the ones who walk away first, and leave nothing for them to come back to.